Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's part, we're going to talk about async in JavaScript, which is going to contain 4 parts: our callbacks, asynchronous, promises, and async await, and how we can use them. The first thing that we're going to cover is, of course, our first part, which is going to be our callbacks. Callback is a function that pass as an argument into another function. And by using this, we can define some functions to call another function while executing. For example, let's say here we have our function of calculate, which is going to receive 2 parameters of a and b. And inside of our code, we're going to have our result variable, which is going to be a plus b. And then let's say we want to console log our result just like this. So if we run our calculate function right here and pass 2 numbers of 1 and 2, for example, if we run, of course, we're going to see this 3 coming into our console. And this is our simple functions that we can use. But let's use another callback function right here. So let's say here we're going to have another function with the name of add, which is going to receive again 2 parameters of a and b. And inside the code, we want to return the sum of these 2 variables, which is going to be a plus b. And if we want to use this function inside of our first function, here we're going to have another parameter of callback just right here. And here, instead of using this static calculation inside of our calculate function, we're going to use our function of add and pass the variables of a and b into this. And another thing that we need to do is when we call our calculate function, we need to pass in the callback function that we have, which in this case is going to be this add function. And pay attention that here we don't use parentheses as calling them. We just put the name of our function right here. And here, when we want to use this add function, instead of using the name of our function, we grab this callback variable that we created right here. And after this, we run this function. And if we run this, as you see, again, we're going to see the result of 3. And this is how we can use callbacks in JavaScript. And another type of callbacks that we can use instead of this, let's say here we have our callback and run our callback right here. But here we can define our function inside of these parentheses while calling our first function. And here we're going to use arrow function right here just like this. And inside of the code, we can use this return a plus b. And of course, we're going to receive a and b here in our callback function. And if we run this, again, you're going to see, let's clear our console and run again. Again, you're going to see this 3 coming up right here. And because this is arrow function and we want to return only this a plus b, we can use this just like this too. And again, if we run, you can see that we got the result of 3. The next topic that we're going to talk about is our asynchronous in JavaScript. And basically, functions which are going to run at the same time are going to be called asynchronous. For example, let's say we're going to have 2 functions and we want both of them to run together in the same time. That is going to be asynchronous. But before using that, let's talk about our time. And one of the best example of our asynchronous in JavaScript is going to be our setTimeout function, which this is predefined function in JavaScript. So if we call that here, we can use that. And inside of this, when we calling this, we're going to have this callback function right here. And then here we need to pass milliseconds that we want our code to wait, because this function is going to wait this much time that we put right here. And after this much milliseconds, it's going to run callback function that we passed here. So let's say we want this to run after 2 seconds. Because this is milliseconds, we need to pass 2000 to here. And for our callback function, as I said earlier, we can define it just right here, or we can use another function to do that. So here, let's say we want to simply run console log function is running. And actually, we need to have these curly braces here too. Now, if we run, you can see first we don't have anything right here, but after 2 seconds, we're going to see this function is running. And this function is going to wait 2 seconds and then run this code. But if we have another function or another code right here, let's say here we want to have another console log of our base code running. If we run, you can see that we got this base code running, and after 2 seconds, we got this function is running. So what our code is going to do is when it started, first it's going to come and call this function and wait 2 seconds from starting of running our program. Meanwhile, it's going to run any other codes that we have after this, and when the 2000 milliseconds has passed, or for simplifying, when 2 seconds pass, it's going to run the function that we passed right here. And these two parts are going to run in the same time, the waiting of our setTimeout function and other codes. Another thing that we have, which is similar to this setTimeout, is going to be our setInterval function, which this is again predefined function in JavaScript. And what this does, it's going to repeat running this callback function every 2 seconds. What I mean is, let's say we clear our console and run our code. You can see that we got this base code running. Function is running. It's going to wait 2 seconds and again run that function. And this type of running multiple things in the same time is going to be called asynchronous. And of course, we can have both of setInterval and setTimeout at the same time. For example, this time, let's say we're going to have again arrow function right here, console log of timeout function, and here let's make this interval function. And this is going to receive another parameter of time. Let's say we want this to be run after 30 seconds. And when we run this, you can see that we got our base code, our interval function right here, then our timeout function. But pay attention that our timeout function is going to run only once, but our interval function is going to run repeatedly every 2 seconds. So the next topic that we're going to talk about is our promises. Promises are type of object that we can have inside of our code, and we can do several things with that. So let's say here we have simple p1 as our promise, and as I say, this is object, so we can create that by this syntax. And this is going to receive function from us, which is going to be callback function. Actually, I want to create the function out of this parentheses, so I put the name of callback right here, and then here we want to define our function. So we're going to have this function of callback right here, and this function is going to receive 2 callback functions, which we use these promises when we want to do action after of some things. For example, let's say we have some codes right here, and after this we want to run 2 type of functions, 2 type of different codes based off this code. And it's some kind of like of our try catch, which we use this try catch, and we're trying this. If there is some error, we're going to run this. If there is no error, we're going to run other codes, but a little different. So here we're going to have first a function that we want to have if our code and our result is successful. So let's say we want to make the name to success, and then we want another function which is going to be run when we have some errors. So let's say we have this error for this function. And inside of this function, of course, we need to run these ones right here, and we can run any other codes that we want. And this is going to be run when our code and our result is going to be in success. And this other one is going to be run when we got error. And for using that, you can use any promise that we have, that we're going to have some of them when we are going to fetch some data from our API or our database or our backend server, which is going to be later in the course. But whenever we got some promise, we can use several things and this type of things on that. We select our promise, which in this case, I'm using this promise right here. And after this, we use the keyword of then, which is something like a method that we can use several times right here. So after this, for example, we can have some codes right here. And after this, again, we can have another then and another codes right here. And this is not limited. And we can use this how many times and how much that we want. And inside of that, we're going to have our functions, which let's say we got this arrow function, which is going to grab value for us and runs our code for us. For example, let's say we want console log here, success, result, code. And as same as this, we're going to have another function, which is going to grab the error and it's going to run when we got errors inside of our code. And here we can use this function right here and remove this arrow so it can be basic functions. And pay attention in these syntax and in this situation, we need to separate these with comma. That is going to grab this function and this function, which we have just right here, which is callback function, just like this, is going to grab success function and error function. So when we use this then, this is going to be our success function. Just right here, we're passing into our callback function, which is this success. So this is our first function. And then we have this error function right here. And if we want to use the previous syntax of our arrow function, again, we need to separate them by this comma right here. And we are going to use this a lot, and you know more about this and how to use this kind of things inside of your code in our next several parts, which we're going to talk about APIs and fetching data from them. The next topic that again is very useful, especially in fetching data, is our async and awaits that we can use, which by using async and await, we make our function to return a promise for us or wait for a promise, that we can use this kind of things on that. So for example, let's say here we have simple function of sum right here, which is going to receive two values of a and b from us. And here we have simply return of a plus b. This is simple function that we have. But here, if we use our async before of our function keyword right here, we order to this function that you must return promise for us. And here, if we run our function of sum with the values of 1 and 2, if we run, actually we need to console log this. So if we run this, you can see that we got returning a promise that has the value of 3 inside of this. So because of this, if we remove this console log, we can use the things that we got in our promises, which is going to be this then. And here we can use anything that we want with our value. And as you know, this is going to have two parts, which is going to be callback function for the success code and callback function for the error. So let's say here we want to define again two arrow functions right here. First one is going to grab value for us, and we want our success function to simply console log our value for us. And in our error function, we want this to grab our error, and this time we want console log that error that we got from our promise. And now if we run, you can see that we got this 3 because our function, which is async, has returned some value for us, which means when we calling this, we got the success result. And then because it is async, it's returning us some promise, which we can use this dot then and this type of things, which again, in this part, because we got the success code, we're going to run the first function, which is going to console log the value that this function returned for us. But if there is something wrong about the function that give us some error instead of value, we got the error to print into our console. And then we're going to have our await, which we can use this only inside of our async functions. So our await keyword makes the function pause the execution and wait for the promise comes. For example, let's say here we're going to have some variable of res right here, which is going to be run some random functions of fetch API, for example, which actually we don't have this. We have fetch function that we're going to talk about, but let's say this is some function that we want to have, and this function is going to grab some data from some places for us. So what we can do is we can use this await keyword right here, and by using this, when our function runs, here in the second line, it's going to wait for this function to run and return the promise for us that we can save this into this result, and then we can return that promise when we calling our function, because we have this async before our function keyword, which is going to make this function return some promises. And we're going to talk more about our asynchronous promises, async await, and callbacks in the API and fetch data parts later. And make sure to watch those videos too, so you can fully understand the whole topic of asynchronous, callbacks, promises, and this async await. Please give a like and subscribe to catch next videos.